All right, most athletes at this point have figured out that the game is mental. There is a piece of the game that requires a mental side of you. But most athletes still are not training the mental side of their performance. They don't train it like their body. So today, I'm joined by former MLB player and mindset coach Chad Hermansen to talk about how to actually train your mind for confidence, focus, and freedom. Um, and we're doing it the same way, talking about what the pros do. Chad was first round pick with the Pirates. Now he helps athletes master the mental side of performance through his Mental Edge program and his book, The Parent Edge. We also both contribute to Total Player Development. This is an app for baseball players, and this just helps you guys get those actionable tips, those actionable tools to help you guys take action. So we're actually going to pull out some of the stuff from the app, and that'll kind of give you guys some of that for what's going to help you guys on the mental side. So if you get stuck in your own head, you overthink, you feel pressure, or you lose confidence under pressure, then this is a really good podcast to tune into. So Chad, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, Nick. Thanks for having me. We got a few hours of sleep after that long Dodger game last night.
Yeah, the 18 innings. I was thinking our Mariners game, 15 innings. I was like, that's the pin. That's right there. Like that should be a World Series game. And then they go and do 18 innings. I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah, I shut it off at, I think it was I guess it would have been the top of the 18th. I'm out. So it's getting a little bit late for me, so I got to get up and talk to Nick in the morning. So let's get this thing rolling, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so speaking of the MLB, like I want to kind of hear from you about how you what made you realize, like, what was that moment that made you realize that mental side of the game was as important as that physical side? Like, what made that shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you play, you learn from a somewhat of a fairly early age. You're like, man, I'm a pretty confident player, but sometimes if I go, I would say my amateur career was pretty solid. I was able to go to like 2 World Series when I was like 13 and 15 you used to play Little League all the way through that. Yeah. So I had a pretty good, amateur career. And so which meant pretty successful. Like as a hitter, we kind of think with baseball as a hitter, like that's kind of the big mindset, mental portion of the game. So there's a difference between going 3 for 4 pretty much every game and going like 0 for 4 or 1 for 4. And so those type of days didn't really happen until pro ball, where, I think everyone had drafted the first round, like guys are pretty much hitting 400 to 500, maybe higher, in high school. So there's a lot of success happening. So you don't really know or understand failure to a big level. And so for me, once it started for me, like drafted as a shortstop, and I was the first shortstop taken in the 95 draft. And so you kind of like, then you get into pro ball and you're like, man, I kind of feel like there's some expectations here, and it felt kind of heavy to me. And I was a kind of labeled as a power hitter shortstop. So at the days of when A-Rod and Derek Jeter and Nomar Garciaparra, those kind of guys, I was, as a young prospect, getting lumped in to that could be part of that group at some point, if I could stick at shortstop type thing. And so long story short, that did not happen, as far as that game goes. And I actually moved off of shortstop, making a ton of errors, throwing the ball all over the place in the minor leagues, but doing a pretty decent job of hitting, and having some success, striking out a lot as a young player, but also I was pretty much the youngest player almost in the league in most of the leagues I played in, and got to AA at 19, AAA at 20. So I'm playing with older guys and like men. I'm still kind of a teenager playing with men, and so you start to kind of realize, man, there's a lot of failure. There's a lot of 0 for 4s. And then you have your good game, and so the balance is a little bit different. And you're hitting more now to 250 to maybe 300. Hopefully, I don't think I ever hit 300 in a minor league career or major leagues at all. But now you're in the 200s, and that feels differently. And so you go home a lot more after games in failure, feeling like, man, I kind of stunk today, And then you kind of notice later on that, man, my thoughts were all over the place. I didn't feel confident. I didn't act with confidence. Those type of things. So position changes, got to the big leagues quickly, hit like 60 home runs in 2 years in AAA. So it was kind of labeled coming up with the Pirates as one of the top outfield prospect they've had since Barry Bonds. I kind of share that a lot. And so that just kind of felt heavy to me. But I was also at the same time, I think, able to handle parts of that pretty well. And, looking back and reflecting, but then some parts are like, man. But the biggest thing for me was when I had a swing change from a coach like 2 days into my big league experience. And that really kind of threw me for a loop. And so being young, being 21 and kind of a yes man, like I'll do whatever you say, sir, as a young player and want to be coachable. I took that to heart, and I was really kind of upset with it when it happened. I was like, bro, like I've done pretty well the last 2 years, and you actually told me some things how to work on over these last 2 years. I did those, and now you're kind of saying the opposite. So I felt very confused as a young player, and then my mindset was like, man, I better do what he says or I'm going to be in trouble type thing, like almost like dad is going to yell at me type thing. So I kind of played in fear and scared to like, man, if I don't start hitting, he's going to be really mad at me. And I never had those thoughts or feelings as a minor leaguer. I just went and played. So now I'm playing in fear in the big leagues and really not trusting myself. And my confidence is kind of going way out the door, pretty much daily. And really questioning, man, am I even good enough to be here? And so that was kind of put into my head when a coach said, like, you can't hit like that here. This is the big leagues. This is the Mecca type thing. And it really, it messed with me, as a young player. And so struggling, as a young 21, 22, 23-year-old in the big leagues and kind of going up and down between that and AAA, it was obviously, you kind of learn about baseball. It's a game of adjustments, and you have to learn how to adjust. But also I was kind of losing confidence in coaches, to be frank. And so I was like, man, I feel like I'm just kind of on my own doing this thing. And so during this whole period and the whole time, like I never went to like a sports psychologist, someone to help. It was, managers and coaches, they're not trained in the mental game, at that level. And so they're just like, hey man, just keep battling. Just, they're trying to do their best. They don't really know, they're just like, don't be soft. Don't be, there's other words you could use for that type thing, but just go battle. You just got to go battle, grind it out. And that's pretty fair, I think, with coaches that don't really know. And so with my career, probably my big league career was about 21 to 25, roughly, of 26 maybe, of up and down. Ended up about 3 years in the major leagues. But really looking back, like I was really never myself, and it wasn't super fun, because I was always battling this kind of, let's say, the inner demons of the mental game. And confidence is super great some days. And then some days it's like, man, it was kind of like, when I talk to players and they kind of feel how, man, if I don't get a hit or a couple hits this game, I'm not going to play tomorrow. I never ever experienced that until the big leagues. Right. So learning that and kind of dealing with that as a younger player, you're like, man, this kind of stinks, trying to, if I don't succeed, I won't play tomorrow. So it makes you grow up fast. You kind of have to check yourself, and believe me, I've done 20 years of reflecting on all of this. And so I've gotten to a place where I was really angry with coaches and the way I was kind of treated in that aspect. Had many people tell me, it's like, man, if you were just with a different organization, things would probably have been different. And that might all be true, but the facts are the facts, and you just kind of have to work through those. So, but to get to your question of when did I get into mental performance? So after my playing career was over, I became a scout. I kind of got into hitting lessons and did that thing. I was like, okay, what's next? What do I do? I was 30 years old. I played for 13 years. Now what? Right. So I did lessons for a little while. I worked at a facility, and then I worked out at Bishop Gorman High School here in Las Vegas is where I'm located. And this happens to be Joey Gallo's senior year of this was like 2012, I believe it was. And I'm starting to see all these scouts just show up. They're scouting Joey. Joey's ended up being a very high, first round, I think, supplemental pick. Huge power, as much power as I've ever seen out of a player in high school. But I started like, man, these scouts are all over the place. That would be a cool gig, get into scouting. So scouted for 8 years, got picked up by the Angels, scouted. But during that time in that process, I started to get just kind of random phone calls here from local people here in the Henderson Green Valley areas where I live, and kind of just like, hey, can you help my son? I know you went through a lot as a player. Do you think you could help my son? And so I get kind of random texts and stuff, and so I would just call them and like help them out. And I was like, man, this is kind of cool, And I was just utilizing my experiences and just kind of whether it was a pep talk, coaching conversation, whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. And then from that, I got furloughed by the Angels when COVID hit. So the Angels were a team that let a couple of scouts go, and so I was very upset about that when that happened. But it's been a blessing in disguise, of course, since then. But then I wanted to take this a step further and be like, man, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going off my experiences, which are very helpful, I think. But also I need to give these players some tools, some mindset tools and stuff that's actually been, through sports psychology and psychologists have used to help with that. So I took a bunch of different certifications and went through, like Brian Caines of the world. I just went through Tom Hansen, who is, he wrote Heads Up Baseball. So I become actually really close friends with him. And then I took this to a whole different level. And the model that you've kind of learned is the self-coaching model through the life coach school. So kind of just coaching, I just want to learn coaching from that perspective and learn different tools. And so I took all those tools, all those certifications, and created the Mental Edge, which is I've been doing for like 5+ years now, and have coached hundreds of athletes, all over the country, and coach individuals and coach teams, and have surprisingly have worked with a lot of different athletes from different sports. And mindset tools are pretty universal, so you can pretty much utilize them in any sport. And so, yeah, it's been 5+ years of really, some fulfillment for me personally of, I guess you could say I'm a service oriented guy. Anytime we help people, it just feels good. Mm-hmm. And so there's nothing like getting a text from a parent like, hey, thank you so much for, helping my son or my daughter. Like they're a completely different person, 5-6 weeks later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's really cool to see your journey. And I feel like, number one, for the players listening, the high schoolers especially, I know that some of those pressures have kind of been elevated, especially with travel ball. With you said there used to be one little league World Series, now there's like 10 of them. Like there's all these different showcases, all this different pressure, and you're facing, like, I know one of my clients here in Washington, like he was down at Jupiter and he was like seeing pitching he had never seen before. And, he even faced in his league, he faced Oregon State commit and who was throwing like 95, whatever. And it's just like a whole different level. So there's just a lot of pressure there. And so, like you mentioned the self-coaching model. I also like you mentioned, the facts are the facts when you talk about your journey and everything. And I think that I feel like ties into kind of the start of that self-coaching model. But like, can you talk about it just briefly of what it is, but more spend some time on like how it can help with athletes?
Yeah, well, to give you the idea, so if I paint a picture for you, so there's 5 aspects to the coaching model, and and what it's for is, so it's when we as individuals, so think if you're just a parent listening to this, for example, you're not playing baseball or sport. So if you feel like you have a problem, something's going on, right? You're trying to figure out what the heck is happening. So the first part of the model is circumstances, right? So these are facts, they're neutral data points, things that happen to us in the world. There's many circumstances every day that happen to us individually, right? And then all of a sudden, after these circumstances happen, we have this trigger almost we ask a question almost in our mind, like, well, what am I making this circumstance mean? Mm-hmm. Right? So it's kind of a quick question. And then our brain kicks in and goes, oh, I'm going to have a thought about this circumstance, right? And the way we use the definition of a thought is just, it's a phrase in your mind, right? Just a quick phrase, and it doesn't have to be even true. Right. It's just a kind of a boom. It just pops in there. Right. So you have a thought about the circumstance. And why is that important? Because the thought pretty much creates how you feel. Right. So now you have a feeling that has happened to you. And the feeling definition we use for that, it's like a vibration in your body. Right. So when you get angry, mad, happy, sad, right? There's a vibrational aspect of it inside of you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we tend to act out of these feelings a lot of times, right? So think about when you're mad, we get angry a lot as humans, right? So when we're angry, right? So that we have this feeling and this thing happening to us, then when out of our feeling, a lot of times our action occurs or inaction. So we have circumstances, thoughts, feelings, and then feelings can create actions in what we do. Now we're all in sports. We're kind of told a lot that when I was learning the model, like yeah, but even though you feel a certain way, and this is life too, right? You still need to do actions, even though you feel sad or whatever, and it's true. But the point of the model is like, man, if I'm so angry, I tend to like withdraw and I don't do actions because I'm in like disappointment or frustration. So it's really important to understand the feelings aspect of it because we're human, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have the feelings, and feelings can create actions or inactions, and of course, actions create results. So if we look at the five, with abbreviation of it is CTFAR, right? Circumstance, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. And so my wife is the one who introduced me to this when I was scouting. And kind of point being, because like the story I told you, I was in angry mode somewhat within myself for not really fulfilling the hype, the expectations of being a first round pick. And like, man, I wanted to play 10 years in the big leagues, and my dreams did not come true, even though I played in the big leagues. And I probably, if you look at my baseball card, have roughly about 1 year's worth of at bats. Maybe not even that. That's not even over 500 plate appearances. So that was not what I was expecting. Right. And so in a way, whether I wanted to kind of put blame on other people, coaches, like, oh, he messed me up. So I was in a really kind of inner turmoil about that for years. And so even though it's like, dude, you got to take responsibility for this, talking to Chad, the hitting coach, I'm a hitting coach too now, so it's like, yes, we need to take responsibility as individuals, but there's some aspect of it too. Like as a coach, you need to take responsibility. If you're going to give a player information that could possibly change their whole swing, if you will, in this kind of metaphor, like you better know what you're talking about, and it better be the right advice, because it can ruin people, and that's kind of my experience. And so without going to therapy, kind of, probably, which I probably needed over time. So in essence, I learned how to coach myself and understand, okay, I'm going to still have thoughts and feelings about that change, about that circumstance of the coach telling me you can't hit like this here, so with that information in the model, I started to coach myself like, man, because even now I could feel like I get a little vibration when I bring it up and talk about it. There's still emotion involved. And so, and I think that's probably going to always be the case, but it's not as heavy, as it used to be. And I can work through that a little bit more. So once I started to use that model, I'm like, holy cow, like this would have been really helpful if I was 21, 22 and could work through that. Because it's literally called a self-coaching model. So I could have done models and just kind of written stuff down on paper and be like, yep, I can see why I'm so angry, why this happened. And so that's what I teach players because they're in the same boat, right? They're young teenagers or even 10, 11, 12-year-olds. They're like, hey, my coach said this to me. I'll think, okay, well, that's just a circumstance, right? They're just words. But you had a thought about it, and you're feeling really angry about it. And what did you do when you're angry? Like I literally had a talk last night with a 13-year-old here in town. He had a coach experience like that. And coach made him all these promises, and he wasn't starting the championship game, the 2 weeks ago. And he was really angry. And what did he do when he was angry? He went and sat on the bench. I call it your pouting mode. I go pout on the bench. I get really quiet. I don't cheer on my teammates. Okay, well, in that case, so if a coach sees you doing those actions, what's your result, player? I go, did you end up playing that game? He's like, nope. I was like, of course not, because you're in your pity party, right? And it's, as a 13-year-old, like, well, what the heck? Like, what am I supposed to do? I was like, what do you think you're supposed to do? And I let him answer it. And it was like, well, I should probably be up there with my teammates. Yeah. Right. Because what do you want to do? Well, it's like, well, I want to play. I do want to play. Maybe I'm going to get a pinch hit or, go in for defense. Is a coach going to play you if you're sitting on the bench pouting? No. Okay. Right. So he kind of had a little aha moment of like, because when you're in it, right, as an individual, you don't see it, and that's why I 100% believe in having a coach, because I coach adults, right? And you might book the Parent Edge. So when if a parent has asked me, hey, can you coach me through this, and I do a model with them and I show them, because now with the parents, right, their kid is the circumstance, right? So everything revolves around the kid. And so if someone messes with their kid, a coach or somebody, they're going to have thoughts and feelings about that, right? So that's why the model, it just works so well, because number one, as a coach, I can coach someone through that. I'm not some genius coach that I don't have a sports psychology degree, but I can write words down and see, like, dude, I can see why you're causing your own suffering here. Can you see it? Right. So I have to I have to be bold with people and tell them, like, hey, bro, or mom or dad, you're causing your own suffering here. You can either stay here or you can decide to change it. Right. So we start to work on it. So once you see it, though, you can now say, oh, okay, now I can, it's like this. It's called an unintentional model. It just, that thought appears. It's the first thought that comes. And I'm like, yeah, it's the first thought. But notice how a lot of times it's not true. So it's very fascinating to me. It's fun. It's exciting. And it's very helpful, because when a person learns the model, they can start to really coach themselves. That's why I called the book, behind me here, like How to Coach Yourself, essentially, before you go rip a coach's head off when your athlete's not playing.
Yeah. So I know, like you use the parent example of sometimes as a parent, it can be difficult to regulate emotions, coaches. But I know with athletes, I've seen athletes, I've talked to athletes who have a real struggle with their emotions, and their feelings. And, just a few examples, like I've seen, football players getting really frustrated when their coaches are really just, the team is struggling. Like there was a local team that they ended up, they're like 0 for 8, and their coach had quit like halfway through the season, and it was just a really, really rough experience. And I've seen some of the players and just how hard it is for them to see that, because then it's like, okay, well, like especially the seniors, it's like, okay, I'm, it's kind of similar where it's like, this is a crucial moment for me. I'm trying to go to the next level, and now like our team is struggling this hardcore, people are goofing off, and I'm over here trying to play in college, and I'm playing for this team, and then I lose my coach. And then there's like you mentioned, some of those specific things like getting benched and whatnot, but I know that can be really difficult, feelings wise, emotions wise, for athletes, especially teen athletes who are figuring all of that out. How can they train that in a, like, I guess, quicker way? Because a lot of these things we learn over years, but like, how can we use that model to basically shrink the time that we're developing that regulation, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first part is, if you can distinguish how other people in your, like, if you're a player, football player, right, and you're playing with your teammates, your coaches, referees, parents, those are all circumstances to you. So what they go to the very top of we call it the C line, right? The circumstance. And so anything they do, the model still applies, meaning like I still can choose, how do I want to think? So like if a coach yells at you, and calls you all these types of names, now he might be verbally abusing you a little bit, but he's not physically hurting you, right? So if you kind of can learn how to separate, these are just words, said in this certain tone, right? He has certain thoughts and feelings about me and my performance. And so his action is going to be, I'm going to yell out what I need you to do. And it's going to be stern and like in your face, right? So if you can learn as a player, as an athlete, like, okay, coach is in my face yelling at me, Like you see, in fact, football is a great example. You see many examples of a coach literally yelling at a player, and the player is just staring at the coach like yes, sir, or not moving at all, and just like he's kind of just nodding while he's getting verbally abused. So they're learning how to not react to getting verbally abused. Now, I'm not saying that's healthy, but you have to learn how to take it from a coach because he has expectations of you. And really, you should have expectations too. So a coach is holding you accountable. You know, you missed a block, you know. You know, baseball's so different from football and all those other sports. But, you know, baseball, the emotions that you kind of talk to with the younger players is, hey, you're going to strike out a lot. And so how do you handle yourself when you walk back to the bench? You know, are you chucking your equipment? Are you in your pity party? Right? Are you feeling, because you are sad, you're mad, you're upset, as you should be. You should be upset. I would be a little concerned if you weren't. However, learning how to, I call it sitting in the suck. You got to sit in the suck for maybe a minute or two, and then you have to breathe through it, you know, and then what I call is acting big. You know, if I learned from Tom Hansen, you got to act big. And each of us individually, like Nick, you have little Nick and big Nick. Like little Nick shows up sometimes, some days, like, dude, I don't want to go to work. Dude, I'm exhausted. I don't want to do this. So you feel tired, right? You have all of these thoughts. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. So those are just your thoughts, but they're creating how you feel. And then you have to do, well, am I going to act out of feeling this tiredness, or do I just have to go? I got to go to work anyway, even though I don't feel like it. So that's the whole, it connects, right, to everything. And so, and a lot of times I'm learning too, like we're definitely, our thoughts and our emotions are like a GPS for us, right? They're kind of explaining like there's something a little bit off. You don't feel safe. You're kind of maybe in flight mode, or you want to fight something, or you want to just get away, right? So there's some truth to that. You know, that our emotions are telling us something. And so, you know, just kind of getting more into balance and working a process of like, okay, how can I just regulate myself to get back to, even though I don't want to do this, I think I need to do it. How do I get back to it? And it's simply kind of thinking, well, what's the next best thought and feeling I could have to get myself moving, you know? You know, because motivation is interesting, and I've heard a lot of coaches are like, "Well, I don't touch motivation," and I'm kind of along the same line. I'm like, bro, if I have to fire you up to go work, you know, to like go get your workout in, or like we got a problem, right? You're basically allowing your thoughts and feelings to get in the way of what you need to do, because you're not doing what you told me your goal is to go play college baseball, and you want to go play at Vanderbilt. Yet you work out once or twice a week, right? You're not even doing the bare minimum, you know, of what it takes to get to that level. So there's a lot of sternness sometimes, and you know, and I'm not really a coach that calls people out, but I point it out to them, like, because I'm not an accountability coach, meaning like, okay, you're gonna go, you're gonna work out 4 times this week. I better, by next week I talk to you, we better have all these checked off. If not, like, I don't do that. I don't like the energy behind that. And I have too many clients to be like, hey, bro, why aren't you doing these things? I don't want to live life that way.
Yeah.
It's more like, these are the things you need to do. It's up to you whether you do them or not. So even when I talk to parents and they're like, hey, well, how does this process work? I was like, well, I'm going to teach them tools. And I'm going to teach them tools. I'm going to give them a small assignment to do. And it's a minimal assignment, right? And sometimes they can't even do that, right? And so it's like, but also with the mental game, as you probably noticed too, there's got to be a little bit of some buy-in. You know, that a kid, an athlete has to understand, like, because if myself, I don't know if I would have done mental coaching, like how to coach, like say in high school. I'm like, bro, I'm 4 for 4 every game. I hit a home run every game. Like, what do I need this for? I already know I'm good. I'm confident. So that experience for me didn't happen until maybe a year later when I really needed it. I'm like, dude, I need someone just to talk to. Right. So a lot of what I do is not only, the just anybody can coach tools. That's here's information. Go try that. You could do that. Anybody could do that, right? Um, but it's a matter of connecting right with the athlete and allowing them, number one, to trust you, where they can kind of share their heart with you and be like, yeah, this is kind of what I'm feeling, and this is my experience I have. So that, as a coach, I feel like I have to have some empathy, but also have to not jump in the pool with them essentially and feel all sorry for what they're going through and experiencing, because that doesn't help anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Right. My job would be to help them, move forward and get to work.
For sure. No, I think that's a huge piece. Is like it's like the whole thing. You can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. Like you gotta take some action there. And I feel like that's how I do similarly with clients. Like we always have a plan when they're done with the call, like, hey, these are the things to work on. But there's a level of there's a level of like, you got to go do this thing. I can't message you every day or like constantly be like, all right, dude, like, why aren't you doing this type of thing? The other thing, what I mentioned in the introduction, I want to make sure we hit on is the overthinking piece. So it may not necessarily be an emotions thing, but it be an overthinking, get in your head, especially when there's like a slump. I see this a lot. Like you go 0 for 4 and you struggle and you get in the slump. That could happen to hitters, to pitchers. What is a good strategy for athletes to essentially get out of their own head and not to be overthinking so much?
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, when speaking in terms for baseball, right? Because we're talking about, if you mentioned slump with hitting, so you're going to have them. You're going to go 0 for 10, 0 for 20, and so you have to have short-term memory loss, right? But also when you do well and you succeed, like relish in those moments and try to really incorporate number one, you got to have some type of process of getting ready for your at bat. Like some type of routine. Now, some people are very rigid with their routines. Like, I got to take 3 swings. I got to do, 3 arm circles. Like, I would be cautious of that kind of stuff, being really rigid, because what if it's just one pitch, the guy in front of you. And so you got to be, I think you be ready to go at all times, but also overthinking again. So the part of that's the word thinking. So you just have too many thoughts. So I think a big part of learning how to slow your mind down. And to me, I'm the only real thing I'm aware of is obviously in game. We want to slow our breathing down, but we also want to get to baseball's played really one pitch at a time. So if you connect that to a model, like each pitch is literally like a circumstance, right? So if we can kind of separate like each pitch is a circumstance, like, okay, I'm going to have a thought and feeling surrounding all that. But also when I play, I need to get to a point, because hopefully we talk about like flow and just playing, I need to get back to me as a kid. Let's say I'm 18 and I'm like, dude, I'm just overthinking. So a lot of, well, how did you play when you were 10? Like, did you care what your coaches thought, what your parents thought? What did you do? And they're always like, well, I just went and played, because you trusted yourself. You just went and played. You weren't, we get caught up in the results and the outcomes of everything. And so when we don't get that result, then we go overthinking on the bench, and we maybe overanalyze it. And that it's okay to like evaluate your at bat, but at the same time, you're like, okay, well, I fouled off 2 fastballs down the middle, and then like I would do, like, man, I got to get a little bit more on top of that ball. I'm just a little bit underneath it. Or I need to recognize spin out of his hand a little bit sooner so I don't chase down and away. So there's little things like that. But that's the overthinking part is very fascinating to me, because it's the overthinking is we're just kind of I'm not in trust mode, of myself. So when I'm not in trust mode, my confidence falters, it kind of wavers back and forth. And so the belief is not quite there. And so, I think that's why preparation is so key, as a hitter, for example, like I actually do hitting lessons here in Vegas. So I have 30 to 40 hitters a week I work with. And so I ask them questions all the time. Like, so if I've taught them something new, like maybe I'm trying to get them to move a little bit better. Maybe they're kind of all over the place mechanically. So I introduce, maybe a simpler way to move. And I'd be like, okay, now this felt better to you, right? Yeah, that felt really good. Okay. So if you don't do any of that this week and you just come back to me next week, are we going to have to start this all over again? Or are you going to go put in 100 reps of this at least per day? So I just ask them a question because I can't do it for them, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they always like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I've had some surprises like, yeah, I probably won't do that. And I'm like, okay. So I know what kind of athlete in a way I'm dealing with, that maybe that's not their goal. Maybe their goal is just to like, I just want to be on a high school baseball team. I don't even care if I play. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, so I have to set my expectations a little bit differently. But if you're like, no, dude, I want to play in college. I want to go as high as I can. I was like, okay, well, there's some bare minimums to do here. Right. So, but I think by taking those actions and in preparing yourself the best way you can, then you start to learn about yourself. And when you start to notice your mind getting in the way, and, like as a hitter, I'm like, dude, you got one swing thought. Like if you start thinking any more than that about mechanics, you're going to be, you become robotic, you start thinking way too much, and you lose the feel of the game. So it's a lot of feel, right? So that's where the ABCs come into play that I've learned with. So that's the acting big. So even the acting big part for me is like, even if I don't think and feel, relating it back to the model, if I don't think and feel I'm good, or I don't feel confident, well, the next part of the model is action. So, okay, what if I just take confidence, because I'm searching and wanting confidence? What if I just go do and be confidence? So be and do confidence. How can I just do that? So if I go, well, what does it take to be confident? I'm going to probably like, my body posture is going to get a little bit different. I'm like, okay, bro, let's go. I want to be confident. Mm-hmm. So you go act it out essentially. Right. And then B is to breathe. So an athlete, when you're kind of in flow, when you're just working, you're just breathing. It's just normal. It's probably just light, it's deep. And then commit big as to, okay, well, I need to concentrate on what I want to do. So I want to get really dialed in and focused. So as a hitter, I want to see the ball out of the hand, and trust what my plan and approach is at the plate and not deviate from that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like there's just so many things about the mental performance, but like, I think, and I think this is, same with nutrition, where people try to do so many things at once and then they get overwhelmed versus like, I forget what I was listening to recently, or maybe reading something. I feel like I was listening to something within the last couple of days, and it's like, okay, just it was actually this morning, and it's like, okay, you focus on one, like learning a new language, just one sentence, get really good at that one sentence in the new language, then you go to the next thing, and you just like, you stack on that. So, to kind of wrap up here, I want to, because there's so many things we can talk about, but just to, keep this in time, I want to allow you, like, what are the 3 fundamental tools that athletes can work on right now that they can just start implementing on that self-coaching approach?
Yeah. So I guess the first one would be understanding what you can control, right? We hear that all the time in sports performance, because again, taking it back to the model, most of our issues and problems are someone did something to us. Someone said something, because we're typically playing in a sport where we're on a team. Even if you're individuals, you still have a coach, right? So we have outside influences affecting us, right? And so allowing people to say what they're going to say without getting so defensive and reactive, right? So, we could take this as parents and people in everyday life. Like, dude, I got cut off again. I want to go flip this guy off, right? But we're so reactive, right? So there's a part of that, learning how to work through your circumstances and understanding, okay, I want to be in control as much as I can, even though thoughts kind of come and go, right? I want to, when I have that thought come into my mind, like, and I know it's bringing me a kind of the feeling I don't want to experience, I want to be aware of that and recognize it, because it's unintentional. Just boo, it just appears. But then like, okay, I noticed that thought came to me. Can I change it before I go take my action right away? Right. And allow a little bit of space to be like, huh, that's interesting. There's that. I have this character called Gary on my shoulder. So he's like my little me character. Instead of little Chad, it's Gary.
Okay.
So when Gary starts talking to me and like you can't do that. What makes you think you can do that? So when we have that negative self voice, Gary pops up in my head and he's just chirping at me, right? And sometimes I'm like, Gary, bro, like not today. Like you ain't talking to me that way today. I'm not gonna feel that way, and I'm gonna still go take action on what I need to do. So that's one aspect of it. I think we're always searching for confidence, right? And so whether it's and again, that ties back to our preparation. Have I put in the time, the effort, and the skill to go be confident in that? So we want to check some boxes there. Hence why we need to work on our craft and our skill, I think, every day, to get to the point where we can just let it come out. Right. I know I become robotic in certain things sometimes too. So, and then kind of getting back to, if we're kind of focusing more on the baseball side of it, why do you play? What does this game bring you? So when I ask players that, it's usually like, well, it brings me joy, like happiness. Like these are all positive vibes, and kind of, you talk about vibration and frequency and law of attraction type stuff, right? And I play this game because it's fun. So every time a player gives me an answer, it's usually in the model, it's always a feeling.
Yeah.
It's fun. I bring happiness. So kind of getting back to why you do what you do, and to experience. Because whether you win or lose, it's like, man, but that was really fun. Like I bet the Blue Jays were really bummed out last night when they lost in 18, but
Yeah.
there's some experiences in there they had where they're like, man, that was so fun, So getting back to kind of our kid roots, if you will, of playing, and kind of getting back to why we do what we do.
Yeah, no, that's so huge. I love all of those answers, and I think, again, like athletes, there are things that you can implement with each one of those. Like there are practical things, and just like with anything, start small and just do it consistently. Like don't, like you're talking about with the hitting, like do that thing 100 times, like do it just over and over again, so it becomes like second nature to you, just like brushing your teeth. But I want to also leave the athletes. I mean, athletes, number one, and parents. There's multiple ways that you guys can connect with Chad and connect with what he's doing. I mean, there's the book for the parents, the Parent Edge. There's the app that we both contribute to, Total Player Development. All of the links will be in the show notes. But for you, Chad, what would be the number one place you would want to direct athletes and parents to?
Yeah, I would say if you're a parent listening, like get the book. I teach the model in the book, and have shared all these different kind of I guess stories. My personal stories. I have 4 kids myself, so I share stories with my son, who had some expectations too, of dad being a former big leaguer, and I share stories when I wasn't so proud of myself as a parent, and what I learned from that. So yeah, the book leads to, so it teaches you how to kind of slow down and get into that experience. And of course, yeah, and the book leads to parents reaching out, wanting me to work with their kid one-on-one. And I have, kind of short-term and long-term packages that I have for players. And then a lot of my local kids here in Vegas, they with me being a hitting coach too, they come see me in person and hit with me and experience that too. So I have a lot of hitting / mental edge clients, which are my favorite because I get to see them live, joke around with them. And that's a pretty special for me. But yeah, I'm excited about the app that you and I are part of. And I think that's going to be pretty big. And that will continue to grow. And hopefully too, we have ways to get more in touch with the athletes, through that experience. And, we start formulating more plans around that too. So it's literally the first month of infancy here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so, and hopefully you can keep us healthy, you know, with all your nutrition.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
guess,
All about habits. All about
yeah,
habits. Same
all
thing.
about habits. So we can stop eating like we're still 15, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or 12.
Yeah.
That's usually what I say. 12 is my go-to of like, yeah, you're eating like you're 12. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
but yeah, no, I'm excited for it. But yeah, again, for those listening, like check the show notes. I have links for all of that to make it easy for you guys. And Chad, again, I want to thank you for hopping on today. A lot of great stuff for both athletes and parents on here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
our first time meeting in person, or at least in video. So this has been good.
Yeah, for sure. And athletes, like, again, you guys have lots of things you can implement from this. Like, even just take a snippet from this podcast, start implementing that thing, do it consistently, and as always, keep striving for greatness.